Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first insights of the 2022-2023 season. I am Adam Schnell, the Artistic Director and CEO of Ballet Vero Beach. And ironically, this is the first time Jessica Deahr and I have actually A, seen each other, B, actually talked. That's the beauty of email in this day and age. But I am really, really excited to bring you guys today an in-depth conversation with Jessica Deahr, who is the artistic director of Chicago Dance Crash. How are you today, Jessica?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And I will say that we are recording this with you in Chicago. But by the time we e-blast this out to everyone, you'll have just arrived in Vero Beach for the first time, right? Never been to Vero before?
Never been before.
Awesome. So to work in the Riverside Dance Festival, both with the students that are signed up, but also to bring your phenomenal company, Chicago Dance Crash, to Vero for the first time. So let me ask you, tell me a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? How did you get into dance? How did all this get started for you?
Yeah, so I grew up in a northwest suburb of Chicago,
Okay.
but I was lucky to go to a dance studio that was kind of had its hands in every style. So I was one of those kids that grew up doing jazz, ballet, modern, tap, tumbling, you name it, and then eventually started adding hip hop. So yeah, when I started dancing professionally in the city after I did some outside cruise ships and some traveling gigs, once I settled in Chicago, I always danced with companies that either did a fusion of styles like Crash does or kind of focused on old school jazz. So a lot of that background ended up being kind of a perfect fit when I did start to get my foot in the door at Dance Crash.
And did you think that, was it always dance? Like, when did you start? Like, I love hearing how people actually got into dance, because you and I both know it's a calling. You either have to do it or you really don't do it at all. So how did that feel for you? How did that come about?
You know, I started when I was 4, and
Wow.
mostly because I was really shy, and my mom put me in dance class so that I would learn how to open up or maybe find some confidence. And I just became obsessed with it. I was one of those kids that put on shows in my basement and made tickets and programs for people. So I always knew I wanted to do it. Of course, by the time I hit 18, I didn't know if I could do it,
Right.
so there was a little bit of that adult decision making.
Right.
I went to college and got a degree, so I would have a backup. And I told myself, all right, let's give it a try for a year, and if stuff starts coming in and it works, we'll keep doing it. And I
Right.
was lucky enough to always kind of stumble my way from one gig leading to the next and the next until I could kind of carve my own path, and
Yeah.
it ended up working out.
And I think that one of the important things to point out is that not a lot of people know this, that Chicago really is one of the few cities in the United States where you can be a freelancer and go from gig to gig in various styles, not just in ballet with smaller companies and even, dancing with the lyric opera and things like that, but in jazz, in hip hop, in contemporary. And I don't know of another city where so many styles you can be a gig artist and really make it happen.
Yeah.
Did you find did you know that? Were you aware of that growing up, or did you just happen to end in like land in the right place because you grew up in the northwest suburbs?
I mean, I feel like I was lucky to grow up so close to Chicago that that was an option. But yeah, I think a lot of people don't know. There was always a little bit of that talk growing up of like, okay, if you want to dance, go to California or New York.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, there's definitely a community here of people that hustle,
Yeah.
and it doesn't necessarily just have to be teaching dance. Like you said, there's a lot of gig work out there. There's pickup companies. You can have a disco bob on one night and then backup dance for a hip hop band another night, and
Yeah,
then
I've seen your Instagram. That's
yeah,
a real thing. She's not making that up, ladies and gentlemen.
varies. It's on the spectrum. But that's exciting to me. Like I like not just sticking with one
Right.
particular style or thing. I think the more exposure you have to all these different things, and you grab a little bit of that and you throw it into the story show and you grab a little bit of that, and it all kind of informs what keeps you interested and then what might keep the audience interested
Right.
as well.
And at what point did Chicago Dance Crash, or Crash as we say for short, enter the picture?
So Crash was actually founded in 2002. So this is our 20th anniversary.
I'm so
Um,
excited.
Crazy. But I didn't start dancing with them till about 2007. And I guest artist with them for about 5 years before I really got into it and started directing and choreographing. So it was sort of a gradual journey for me of getting to know the company and the dancers and what kind of style of stuff they do.
And did you have an inkling when you started or you were guesting with them that you would someday be at the helm, or how did that happen?
Yes and no. I feel like when you first start with any company, you're trying to figure out where you belong in there.
Right.
But that's the cool thing about Crash is we're not cookie cutters. Like every single person in the room holds their own for a very specific way, for a specific set of skills. So it's not one particular thing that you knew you had to reach to be able to choreograph the next show.
Right.
And
Right.
both the directors before me were male, and both were more in the fight choreo and the breaking and more hip hop. So it's like they had a different amazing skill set than I did anyway. So it's
Right.
each person kind of brings their own choice, their own voice and abilities, and kind of a lot of Crash is about the network of dancers that you have around you too. We
Right.
really like to teach dancers for who they are and what they specialize in.
So let's delve into that a little bit. First of all, how long have you been the artistic director?
This is my 10th year.
Oh my gosh, we're celebrating our 10th season. Weird. When you say that, do you do what you just did often and pause like that? Because I'm like 10 years. Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's crazy. It feels like forever. And then it also feels like a couple years ago. And then you
Right.
get
Right.
a reality check.
So let's talk a little bit about the Crash aesthetic. And if I may, for a second, sort of give a little backstory. We have sometimes with the Riverside Dance Festival and the companies that we invite, we've sometimes opened it up to just straight out applications, and we found companies that way. Sometimes it's word of mouth, sometimes it's friend of mine. You actually came to us in a very kind of odd way. Someone who lives in Chicago part-time but has a house in Vero was aware of what we were doing and said, you got to check out this Chicago Dance Crash. I believe her Pilates instructor or something was on your board or something like that. And my audience members know me, like I roll my eyes at everything. I'm like, okay, another suggestion. I'm sure they're amazing. But then I got in touch with you guys, and what I saw, and this has only happened a couple times throughout the history of doing this, the dance festival, it blew me away. It was like something that I had never seen before. And I started out before ballet in like hip hop, but like early 90s hip hop in rural Vermont. So like we're talking about, was it really hip hop? We're not really sure. Like, I don't even know. I don't even remember what I was doing at that. But the fact that you guys have been able to take this genre that is not always considered a concert dance genre and fuse it in with other dance forms and make it be able to like tell full length narrative works. Like I was blown away. So talk to me about the aesthetic, if you can comment even a little on how it's evolved over 20 years and what you guys are trying to do with the art.
Yeah. I mean, Crash from its founding was always multidisciplinary, right? And the three dancers that founded it were actually dancers from ISU, Illinois State University, and they kind of came together and said, we want to create something that tells stories in a way that hasn't been done before. And so the way they did that was with acting and fight choreo and modern dance, and that's what they became known for, was telling stories through those disciplines. And of course, over the years, that slightly changed as the styles that we specialize in develop, or maybe the dancers we hire do. I mean, right now we have dancers that specialize in everything from breaking and house to acrobatics, modern. It can be anything across the board. But I think
let me interrupt for a second, audience. If you don't know what any of those things are, don't think that I'm sitting here going, oh yes, I know. Oh yes, I'm very familiar with breaking and house. Like, I know the haircut, the summer haircut looks cool,
it's a facade.
You don't have to worry about it. That's what I'm gonna let Jessica continue talking, but that's what I love about this company so much. To me, it comes as close as and I'm a ballet guy, have ever felt for. You don't have to know what a PK arabesque is to feel the emotion and the energy from the dancers. And you guys do that in so many different ways. So I want to reassure our audiences that I am as novice as you all are in all this, but like you got to see it. It's just something you have to see.
Yeah. And I mean, to your point, a lot of times when we think of a story show told through dance, people that maybe aren't as familiar with different styles would think of ballet, you know, that's maybe what they see represented more. But it's like there's all these other vocabularies out there that can tell a story in just the same way, but it will feel different, right? Because we're using a different vocabulary of movement.
Right.
And to me, all those layers make it more exciting. You know, you see the dancers more for their unique personalities, and we see all these different movers, but all in this one cohesive
Yeah.
tale, you know?
And I think
So
that
that's
that's
always fun when we do story shows.
yeah, and that's one of the things that drew me to you all because, and again, some of this our audience knows. I was lucky enough to go to a dance school for high school where that was the aesthetic. Even though it was a ballet academy, it was a boarding school, they said, if you want to dance, you have something to bring to ballet. You have something to bring to dance. It was never about you need to be, as a man, 6'4", and like, it just wasn't that. So watching the diverse group of abilities and different styles that you're talking about that the dancers excel in and coming together for something that's still telling a cohesive story like that, I love that. I can't, like, I mean, you can see the smile on my face because I always tell kids that we're teaching that, like, if you want to do this, you will find a way. Like, the only reason you wouldn't is if you're letting other people stand in your way. Like, you've got something inside of you that you need to get out. Go ahead, start a company of a style like Crash that no one has ever seen before. So when did because I know you guys do a lot of outreach and engagement and a lot of talking about hip hop culture and the history of hip hop and everything like that. Was that always present? Is that something newer?
I would say it's newer based on the collection of dancers that we've had probably over the last 10 years.
Okay.
Even having said that, there's always been, you know, with some of like the stage combat and fight choreo, and there's always been breakers involved in the cast of Crash. So like when I think back on some of the oldest story shows, there's been characters that have represented those different styles as well. But yeah, that's one of the things we're really proud of right now is sort of the outreach shows. We'll be doing at least
yeah, some for our ticket donation partners in Vero for sure. Yeah.
And the dancers kind of together break down the history of these different kind of like street styles and hip hop dance in general. And you know, it's nice to kind of break it down to people so that when they see it all mixed together in a show, they're understanding where things came from and what that means.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we keep talking about story shows, and I know you guys do rep work as well, which, you know, for those unfamiliar, like that's a smaller piece that doesn't make necessarily a full evening or a full afternoon of the show. What's the percentage of that? Like what's the mix? Does it vary from season to season for you guys?
It varies. I would say we almost alternate years creating these really big projects. Like a story show is a pretty big undertaking. We have 14 dancers in this show, costume designer, lighting designer, sound design. It's a big thing. And so what we really like to do then is take the following year to kind of get back to our roots, get a little bit more experimental, play with different guest choreographers. Those tend to be a little bit more rep show or abstract. So we're kind of like refueling our brain for what we want to put together for the next big story show.
So you touched on the fact that the work that folks in Vero will be seeing has 14 dancers. It's called Boomsday. It is your 20th anniversary production show, the show you're really going to be doing most of this season, correct? Tell me a little bit about it, but also I want to talk about how it all comes together, because again, one of the things that I was impressed with you guys about is it's not just the styles of dancers coming together. It's not all one choreographer and it's not all one composer. Like the sound comes together in a design. So it feels like there's a real community of artists behind something like this, which I would say it happens in ballet, but not necessarily in the way that you guys are mixing it all together. So tell me about Boomsday and then take me through the process of to where we're almost about to see, you know, the preview performances in Vero before you guys premiere it in Chicago.
Yeah, well, I guess at its core, Boomsday is very simply a post-apocalyptic tale we're following our main character. She's journeying through this world and she's trying to find her lost family member. And on the way, she stumbles in and out of all these different relationships. And as that happens, the show is almost a commentary on like the cycle that your life goes through, right? Where we have these moments where life is simple, it's peaceful, there's no big choices to make. And then as those choices start to add up and add up and add up, we start to get more to this like chaotic a boom, as we call it, right?
Right.
And then when that resolves, we're back to the beginning where things were simple. So it's kind of a commentary on, peace versus chaos or simplicity versus choices. But within there, the way we design it is done in a way where you can take it and really dig into that message, or you can watch it and enjoy a dance show.
Right. Right. And that's, I keep talking about like when I saw what you guys submitted, and you guys submitted a story work called Little Pine Nut, which is sort of a hip hop retelling of Pinocchio. And that, again, it's what I was drawn to. And it's what we try and do at Ballet Vero Beach. Like, if you want to dive, deep dive into the meaning of something, I will talk about it to you for like 10 or 12 hours, and we can dissect every single hand gesture. But also, your shows are so engaging on that surface, medium, and deep level that, you said post-apocalyptic, but it's not like, this is not a doom and gloom thing. You guys put comedy in there. You put, like you said, tension and chaos, and it's all told through the lens of these phenomenal artists.
Mm-hmm.
So what point is it at now? All right, I know you're coming down here real soon. Where are we at?
Speaking of not being doom and gloom, the story is actually narrated through the eyes or the lens of a 10-year-old girl.
Right.
So there's a little bit of comedy inherently in there, in that she's sort of imagining things or remembering them in her own way. So like, to that point, rather than seeing everyone in black and gray and kind of dirty post-apocalyptic stuff, it's almost brightly colored, like the little girl would see it with her coloring box, right? So everything sort of has her spin on it. It makes everything just a little bit more abstract and kind of like puts you in this world that you're not used to seeing, and we go on that adventure with her. But yeah, so that took some sound design. We had actors come in and record from the script that Mark Hackman wrote, and then I communicate to the guest choreographers this crazy thing they're about to get themselves into. It's like, hey, here's this story, just so you know, there's a villain called the Mean Man, and your piece comes in when he's about to attack the good guys. So there's a lot of moving parts in communication that needs to keep the whole story cohesive, even though there's like 30 voices, making the story come together.
And is it mostly, when you guys do a story piece, is it mostly multiple choreographers?
I would say it's, nowadays we use so much dancer input of, here's what needs to happen here. Like, I need you to make up a phrase that, is you traveling from left to right, and then teach it to this person, but they're going to do it, right? So some of it happens in-house. A lot of it comes from myself and my rehearsal director then, Casey, who luckily are very close to the project. And then on the next perimeter would be like what we call the guest choreographers, and they're coming in to set one big piece, right? So we relay the whole story to them, and then
they sort of put it in their style. But that's still, I don't want to say you're making it difficult for yourself, but that's a lot harder than just, okay, there's this one choreographer, or even a choreographer and assistant like sometimes musicals have going through. But I feel like what I've seen of you guys is the product is so much richer because of it.
Yeah,
do you feel that way?
For sure. Like, and what we try to do is get the guest choreographers to come in towards the beginning of the process. So then, in a really cool way, they almost inform the vocabulary of the whole show, right? Like, we had James Gregg, who used to be in Rubber Band dance, come in, and he set the opening piece, and it was so like abstract and animalistic, and I don't know, we used the way that he worked a lot in creating the other stuff. Andy Franklin is this amazing choreographer who did one of our first 5-on-5 battles that happens in the show. And so a lot of the motifs that she used, of like the way she forms a clump or the way that we move in and out from each other, I feel like in subtle ways that's reflected in the whole show. So it's almost makes it easier to make their piece belong, and that it happened first. And then we're like, oh, that was cool. We should do that every time that character thinks such and such, or every time, so there's ways that we can set it timeline wise that make it all start to swirl together.
Well, and I think that a lot of people, again, it's reflective, obviously, in your leadership in the company and in the work that you guys are doing. But a lot of people think that choreographers and artistic directors, like, we have it all figured out. Like, we've seen it all. We know exactly what we're going to do. But working in the way that you're talking about is a lot of the way that we like to work down here, with bringing in guests and having dancer input. Because I don't know about you, but I need to be refreshed as well. Like, if I had to come up with every single idea and every single
Oh,
step, it would be the same. It would be the same 8 counts over and over again. And
yeah,
it's like,
for sure.
working that way, I think that that's so cool, because it pushes you and the dancers and the rehearsal director to go, oh, that's a really, we can integrate
Totally.
that.
And it
Yeah.
allows you to get the other parts together in time and make them work,
Right.
like
Right.
if you, yeah, for sure. Like delegating that and
Yeah.
getting other voices involved is like
Yeah.
the best decision you can ever make. It makes it richer.
So again, just a lot of stuff that I was drawn to, and so excited to have you guys here. The spoken word element of the score, to me, I found that really fascinating, because it's a dance show, but you have voices to a lot of the characters' thoughts and a lot of the narration. So it almost starts to like bridge the line between dance and theater, but it's not really dance theater. Was that a hallmark of Crash before you? How did that sort of come into the picture?
Yeah, I cannot take credit for that. That's what they were using back in the day, as soon as the story shows began. And sometimes when we do a more abstract story show, we don't necessarily need a narrator. But yeah, depending on the type of show, it can be a really useful way to keep everyone feeling like they know what's happening on
Right.
stage.
Right.
Sometimes I want the audience to guess, but other times you're like, let me help you out here. So
Yes. But
here's
that's
your head.
that's super important, because I'm sure you've had the experience that I've had of been sitting there in an audience going, gosh, a 2 sentence program note would have really helped me out with this one. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what I just saw.
I wish you could pull your own story from it, but I would also like to,
but yeah,
a little bit.
yeah. And I think that the really cool thing about the stuff that I've seen from you guys when using like a narrator and things like that, it also makes the fact that you have in the scores some instrumental music and some music with lyrics, it makes it less jarring. You're already used to the speaking and the visuals, where sometimes, when you go and see a dance show and you're like, oh, instrumental, 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 oh, lyrics, wait, now I have to, it really integrates that. So I think that that's a real sort of kudos to you guys for kind of cracking that nut that I feel like a lot of choreographers have not really gotten that far yet.
Yeah, and this show in particular, it's been easier to do that because another device, of course, with it being called Boomsday, is that the main character has a boombox that she brings around with her. So there's instances where the score that you're hearing we're meant to imply that that's playing literally from the boombox. So
Yeah.
it does kind of help explain when sometimes we have more environmental,
Right.
electronic, post-apocalyptic world music playing, and then she meets a new best friend and says, "Hit it," and then we play a song like is like pop music,
I,
from whenever. So yeah,
I just can't, I
definitely.
cannot tell you how excited I am for this. We always get excited in the summer because, like I said, it's, it sort of re-energizes us for our season and everything like that. But like, when I tell you all out there that like this is going to be a really good one, and I'm so happy it's aligning with our anniversary and your anniversary, I mean it. So let me ask you, I want you to talk a little bit about, so beyond like the productions, what do you all at Crash see as, and I don't mean like the mission that we all list on our tax forms and the nonprofit stuff. What do you see as your mission or job with the work you do? What are you trying to get across to the world?
Hmm. Oh man, I mean our elevator pitch is always that we really like to blur the line between art and entertainment, right? And what that can mean to people. But more so, and I'm thinking about this from something you said earlier, but post COVID, I feel like right now people want to see humans on stage. You know what I mean? I less and less want to see a dancer. Like I want to see someone who genuinely believes what they're doing on stage and they're telling me a story that they're invested in, and I'm going to see something about my life from
Right.
there, and I'm going to be entertained while doing so, and I'm going to think about some of the choices that I made when that's the theme of the show. So like, of course, what we want people to do is relate to the dancers on stage. We want to entertain them. We still want to present to them art. But yeah, it's feeling specifically with this show. I don't know. There's just something different about it that's very much about like thinking about our cycle as humans
Right.
and how we
Right.
interact with each other, you know?
Right. Right. And I think that you're touching on something that I have always felt, and it's sometimes hard to articulate, right? We spend time in the studio, like putting together steps and then talking to donors and like hyping up, please come see this show. But I feel that now more than ever, we need more art and we need more diverse types of art. Like we need a hip hop contemporary post-apocalyptic show. Like we need a beautiful nutcracker to make us feel good at the holiday season. Like we need, and that's just in dance.
Spectrum, yeah.
We've all been separated and apart for so long in all of these ways that what you're talking about and seeing the human beings on stage, I really feel like that's the key for us coming back together, because when you see yourself reflected, you learn things, right? And it's never in a, or it shouldn't be, it's never in a like, you need to learn this right now ways. Like I am constantly still, after everything that I've seen and all we do, amazed when I come out of a theater and go, I just never thought of it that way. And that's what we should be doing. And I think you guys do it in a way that's disarming, which is what I love. Like when you get someone in your audience that hears that pop song that they never thought could be that way, it draws them into that world that you guys are creating. So
Yeah.
I think it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and there's different ways that like, I don't know, speaking to the mission, you know, there's shows that we do in Chicago, and those are so important to us because of course we want to try to push our art and like how it could get better every year, and to have people feel like they're represented on stage, and to try to make the shows more groundbreaking than the last one, right? But aside from that, a lot of times what can be even more rewarding is when we go to towns like you're saying, where people may not be as used to seeing people move the way that some of the dancers do, and like the effect that that can have when you have time to connect with the people in that community, right? With the way the dancers are teaching classes and performing educational shows for 2 weeks beforehand. It's like the effect that that can have, or the bond that it can create between those dancers or those audience members and the dancers on stage is like, oh, that's what we're doing this for.
Yeah,
You know?
right. Yeah, no, absolutely. We do a lot of, and I know you guys do too, like outdoors and in non-traditional theater space and everything like that. We do a lot, just especially since we're so young, getting ourselves out of the proscenium theater. And some of the most transformational shows that we've had have been in like a gym of a rec center, or honestly in a fancy ballroom in one of the country club communities. Like people are that close to you and that close to the dancers. There's something about that when you remove all the extra trappings and you really take that time for the human connection.
Also, like that, and on the flip side of that is bringing people who aren't normally in the theater to the theater with something that kind of meets them.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that again, you know, I keep saying like this feels like a love fest. I'm so excited for you guys to be here, but I think that's why I was so excited to start talking to you guys, because it really is a lot of what we try to do. You might be in a huge metropolitan area with people who are fans of all different types of art, and we might be in a tiny little town, but we're both trying to get dance fans and non-dance fans together to sort of pick up what we're trying to say, you know, and I love that. Talk to me about, so 20 years, congratulations on the, I mean, that's just amazing. I barely accepted that we're at 10 and I can't even think about getting to 20. So what would you like to see? Like if you had a wish list for the next 5 or the next 10 years, what is it? More of the same? Is it different for Crash? What do you want?
I mean, the wish list for me is always getting bigger and better, and not necessarily I don't know if bigger is not the better word, right? But any artistic director's goal is like, I want to be able to pay the dancers more. I want to be able to have them rehearse year round this amount of time. I want to be able to take this story show and do it at 5 different states, you know? So for us, sometimes it's figuring out the logistics of taking what we're doing and making it feel like almost it is full time, but making it feel more full time than it is,
Right. Right.
and maybe with Crash, that's interesting to me because we have so many different things that we put our hands into, right? We have our KTF battles, we have our educational outreach, and master classes and rep shows and story shows, and I don't know. There's just so much opportunity to say, okay, what if we did that, but next year we did it this way, and what if we took a year off that so that next year we could do this version of it. So a lot
Right.
of it just comes down to like which side of it do you want to play with more that year, and how can you make it more quality and even better for the dancer experience and the audience experience.
Right. Do you find this might sound like a dumb question, and people watching this might like roll their eyes that I'm saying this. Do you find that when you keep it dancer and artist focus and making the experience better for them, you automatically please the audiences more?
Yeah, I think that there's yeah, I think that's you have to do. If the dancers don't believe it, it's going to show on
Right.
stage.
And there was like, because I feel like for me, there was a learning curve, like, oh, the audiences want to see this or things like that. And it's not that I ignore that now, but if we do stuff with artists that are excited about doing it, like you said, it automatically makes the audiences happier. So,
Mhm.
it's a weird, it's kind of a weird balancing act. Like you have to think about the ways to bring the audiences into what you're saying, but if the artists and the collaborators aren't really excited about it, it never quite gels
Right.
in
And
that way.
I think for us, so much of that is like trying to make sure people feel like they can get their voice on stage, even if that's just physically through more moments of freestyle, right? Or
Right.
more input in the choreography process, and feeling a little bit less of that old school be quiet in rehearsal and do what
Hmm.
the choreographer said.
Right.
It's kind
Right.
of our way of addressing that. But yeah, there's always so much room to grow as far as like dancer experience, and yeah, really keeping the artist in mind as much as the audience.
And do you find that you are sort of achieving what you were talking about in terms of audiences, getting people into the theater that weren't already accustomed to being there, and also sort of the inverse, like getting folks that may be used to coming to like a Joffrey ballet or going to the lyric opera also checking out what you guys are doing? Do you find that?
Oh man, you're speaking to one of our goals there. And I know every company does this, but you do the surveys where you're asking people like, is this your first time? Have you seen Crash before? Have you seen another company before? And for sure, that's one of the things that we find is a common trend. There's a lot of people who haven't seen dance at all before, or are more accustomed to maybe the three most well-known technical companies, and then somehow filtered into this performance. So the goal is always to like keep them coming back and
Right.
to do something. How do you serve both of those people?
Right.
Someone that's been watching dance for maybe ballet dance for 15 years, and someone who's never seen a dance show and maybe saw So You Think
Right.
You Can Dance. So
Yeah.
that's definitely a challenge, but it's a good frame of reference too when we have a moment on stage, and we're like, how can we communicate this
Right.
clearly to both of those parties without
Well,
knowing the other?
because, and I think I've said this in one of these before, like good art is good art. Do you know what I mean? If it is put together in a way that, the communication is authentic and we're putting it together in a way that feels credible, like it shouldn't take a lot of work to serve both of those audiences. But we still, I mean, I can see it in your eyes. We still think that in the end, and like, okay, so if
Always. I mean,
someone's never seen this
stop,
before, that's, yeah,
yeah, if you stop questioning that, you're not doing it right.
right.
Making sure that you're hitting every point.
Right.
I mean, yeah,
Absolutely.
confidence, but also awareness.
Awesome. Well, I am so happy to have been talking to you today again. We have been speaking with Jessica Deahr, the artistic director of Chicago Dance Crash. By the time you all see this, they will be in town working with local students with the Riverside Dance Festival, and they will be on stage at the Stark Stage, Riverside Theater, August 5th and 6th at 7:30 in Boomsday. And I got to tell y'all, this is going to be one for the books. Don't miss it. Jessica, thank you so much for talking to me. I can't wait to finally meet in person.
Yes, thank you for having me.
No problem.